You are listening to pastthink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. Chapter 47. In pursuit of love, the oaf king takes a fearful beating. And from fear of reprisal, the reluctant playboy makes a hasty getaway. Hearing that Lady Xing had arrived, Lady Wang at once hurried out to meet her. Lady Xing had come over to see if there had been any change in Faithful's attitude. She was ignorant of the fact that the secret was now out, and that Grandmother Jia knew everything. The first she heard of it was when quietly informed by some of Grandmother Jia's women as she entered the old lady's courtyard. She would have liked to turn back, but by then it was already too late. She had already been seen and announced by the servants inside, and when her sister-in-law Lady Wang came out to meet her, she was obliged to go in with her and pay her respects to Grandmother Jia. Finding that her greetings were received by the old lady in stony silence, she was covered with shame and confusion. By this time Xifeng had slipped out on pretext of other business, and Faithful had gone off to her own room to nurse her anger alone. Fearing that their presence might add to Lady Xing's embarrassment, Aunt Shui, Lady Wang and the rest also, one after another, withdrew. When she saw that she and Lady Xing were alone together, Grandmother Jia at last broke her silence. "I hear you have been playing the matchmaker for your husband," she said. "I must congratulate you on your wifely virtue, though I must say, I think that in this case you are carrying wifeliness a little far. You have children and grandchildren of your own now, why should you be frightened of his temper still at your age? Yet they tell me that you positively encourage his excesses." Lady Xing blushed crimson with embarrassment. "I have tried several times to dissuade him, without success. I am sure you must realize that I have acted against my will in this matter." "You did what you were told, all the same," said Grandmother Jia sharply. "Would you do what you were told if he asked you to kill someone? Just reflect for a moment. There is only your sister-in-law, poor, simple soul, she is always ailing from something or other, to worry about the responsibilities of this household. It's true that she has Lian's wife to help her, but she has so much to do that she hardly knows which way to turn, always putting the rake down to pick up the broom. And I have to cut down on all my activities nowadays. So if there is ever anything that your sister-in-law and Feng have overlooked, Faithful is the only one left to make sure that my needs are attended to. She is a child who notices things. If she sees that I lack something, she will either ask for it herself, or have a word with one of the other two and make sure that I get it. Think of all the hundreds and thousands of things there are to be done in this household. If I hadn't got Faithful, how could the other two avoid overlooking something once in a while? So what would you have me do then? Would you expect me to start worrying about all these things myself? Should I have to start calculating what I needed every day and go running off to the other two to ask them for it? Of all the girls I've ever had, Faithful is the only one left me now who is a bit older and more responsible than the rest, who understands my little ways and knows how I like things done. There's a genuine bond between us. For example, she would never take advantage of our relationship, as some girls would, to ask other people for clothes or money for herself. One consequence of this is that not only Feng and your sister-in-law, but everyone else in the household, from the highest down to the lowest, is able to trust her. It means that quite apart from the fact that I have someone I can rely on, Feng and your sister-in-law are saved a great deal of worry, because with a girl like that to look after me, I don't suffer when they occasionally forget something, and that keeps me in a good temper. If Faithful were to leave me now, who would you get for me to put in her place? And even if you could find such a jewel, she'd need to have a tongue in her head too." She called for the servants. "What's happened to everybody? We were just in the middle of a nice chat when suddenly everyone went away." The maids, with answering cries, went off to look for the others. Soon all had been reassembled except Aunt Shui, who showed some resistance to the summons. "I've only just got back," she said. "What's the point of going out again?" "Have a heart, Mrs. Shui," said the maid. "Her old ladyship is in a passion. If you don't come, no one else will ever shift her out of it. If it's the walking that bothers you, I'll carry you there on my back." "Get along with you, little monkey," said Aunt Shui, laughing. A few hard words won't hurt you. She went with the maid nevertheless. On her arrival she was cordially welcomed by Grandmother Jia. "What shall we do?" said the old lady. "Shall we play cards? Come and sit by me, Mrs. Xue. You haven't had much practice. If the two of us sit together, there will be less chance of phone confusing us." "Yes," said Aunt Xue. "You will have to keep an eye on my hand and help me out a bit. Is it to be just the four of us, or shall we have one or two more?" "Just us four, surely," said Lady Wang. "No, let's have one more," said Shifeng. "It will make it more interesting." "Go and call Faithful, someone," said Grandmother Jia. "She can sit below me. Mrs. Xue's eyesight isn't too good. Faithful will be able to keep an eye on both our hands." Shifeng laughed. "I know you can read and write," she said to Tan Chun. "I suppose you haven't learned how to tell fortunes too, by any chance?" "What a strange question," said Tan Chun. "You should be concentrating all your energies on winning some of Grandma's money, not thinking about having your fortune told." "I thought you might be able to tell me how much I'm going to lose today," said Shifeng. "No question of winning anything. Look how Grandma's got me ambushed on every side before we've even started playing." Presently Faithful arrived and sat in the place below Grandmother Jia. Shifeng sat below Faithful. A red blanket was spread over the table, the cards were shuffled, the players cut for deal, and the game began. After they had been playing for some minutes, Faithful noticed that Grandmother Jia had a nearly full hand, and only needed a two of coins to go out. She made a sign to Shifeng, whose turn it was to discard. Shifeng pretended to be in great doubt as to what she ought to play. "I'm sure Aunt Xue is hanging on to the card I want. I'd better let her have this one, and then perhaps she'll part with it." "I'm sure I haven't got anything you want," said Aunt Xue. "I'd need to look at your hand before I believed that," said Shifeng. "You're very welcome to," said Aunt Xue. "Come on, now. Put that card down and let's see what it is." Shifeng laid the card down in front of Aunt Xue, two of coins. "It's no good to me," said Aunt Xue, "but I've an idea your grandmother may be going out now." "Oh no," cried Shifeng in mock dismay. "It's a mistake. I didn't mean to discard that one." But Grandmother Jia, with a crow of triumph, had already thrown down her cards. "You dare take that back? You shouldn't make mistakes." "I told you I needed a fortune teller," said Shifeng. "Well, I played the card, so I suppose I've no one but myself to blame." "I should think so too," said Grandmother Jia. "Give yourself a good hard slap on the face if you want to know where the fault lies." She turned to Aunt Xue. "You mustn't think I'm grasping, Mrs. Xue. I don't play for the money, but I do so enjoy winning." "Of course," said Aunt Xue. "No one would be so idiotic as to suppose that you played for the money." Hearing this, Shifeng, who had meanwhile been counting out the money she had lost, abruptly stopped and threaded the coins back onto the string. "Right," she said, speaking to the others present. "That settles it. She doesn't play for the money, she just enjoys winning. Well, I am mean and grasping, I'm afraid, and when I lose, I like to know how much. But if that's the way she feels, back it all goes again." When Grandmother Jia played cards, it was her unvarying custom to let Faithful shuffle for her. She had been talking to Aunt Xue throughout Shifeng's bit of byplay, but broke off when she became aware that Faithful had made no move. "Come, child," she said. "You're not too upset to shuffle for me, are you?" Faithful took up the cards with a laugh. "No, only Mrs. Lien hasn't paid up yet." "Oh, hasn't she?" said Grandmother Jia. "She'll be lucky if she gets away with that." She called one of the junior maids to her. "Take that string of cash from in front of Mrs. Lien and bring it here." The little maid did as she was bid and laid the money on the table beside Grandmother Jia. "Please let me have it back," Shifeng pleaded, "so that I can give you the right amount." Feng really is rather mean, said Aunt Xue jokingly. It's only a game, after all. Feng stood up and, laying a hand on Aunt Xue's arm, pointed out to her the wooden chest in which Grandmother Jia kept her money. You see that, Aunt? I don't know how much of my money has at one time or another found its way in there. Before I've been playing half an hour, my money in the chest begins calling to my money on the table to come and join it. All I have to do now is wait until it's called it all in, then the game will be over and Granny will be in a good temper again, and I shall be able to go and get on with my work. By the time she had finished saying this, Grandmother Jia and all the others present were laughing. They were still laughing when Patience, fearing that her mistress might have insufficient money by her, came in bringing another string of cash. Don't put it down in front of me, Feng told her. Put it down beside her old ladyship, so that all my money can go into the chest together. We don't want the money in the chest to have to go through the business of calling for it all over again. This made Grandmother Jia laugh so much that she scattered the cards she was holding all over the table. Tear her mouth, she said to Faithful, giving her a playful push. Patience laid the money down as she was bidden, and after laughing a while with the others, went out again. On her way out of the courtyard she ran into Jia Lian, who was just about to enter the gate. Where's Lady Xing? He asked her. Sir, she has sent me to look for her. She's been standing in there with her old ladyship for the last half hour, said Patience. She hasn't dared to move yet, but I dare say she'll get away as soon as she can. Her old ladyship has been in quite a tizzy this morning, but thanks to the mistress, who's been all this time humoring her, she's gradually beginning to calm down a bit. Oh well, when I go in I shall say that I've come to find out if her old ladyship is going to lie Da's place on the 14th, so that I know whether or not to have the carriages ready, said Jia Lian. I can mention that Lady Xing is wanted as an afterthought. And after that perhaps I shall stay on and chaff the old lady a bit for a few minutes. That should be all right, shouldn't it? If you're asking my opinion, I think you'd do much better not to go in at all, said Patience. Everyone's been in trouble with her today, even her ladyship and Bao Yu. If you go in now, you'll walk straight into it. Oh, surely it's all over now, isn't it, said Jia Lian. Surely she's not going to start all over again? It's nothing to do with me, in any case. And sir, she did ask me to go and fetch mother myself. If he finds that I've sent someone else to do it, he's in such a bad temper already, that he'll probably use that as an excuse to take it out on me. He began to go in, and Patience, to whom this sounded reasonable enough, turned back and followed him in across the courtyard. Entering Grandmother Jia's outer door, Jia Lian crossed the reception room on tiptoe and peered into the inner room at the back. He could see his mother standing there. Feng, who had sharper eyes than the rest, spotted him at once and made a sign to him not to enter, and another sign to Lady Xing indicating that she was wanted outside. Lady Xing could not simply walk out, so she filled a cup with some tea and set it down in front of Grandmother Jia. This caused the old lady to turn round, and as Jia Lian chanced at that very moment to be looking in at the doorway, and was unable to withdraw his head in time, she caught a momentary glimpse of him before he disappeared. Who's that outside? She said. It looked like one of the boys peeping in there just now. Yes, said Feng, quickly rising to her feet and going over to the doorway. I thought I saw someone's shadow there just now. Jia Lian walked smiling into the room. I've come to ask if you are going on the 14th, Grandma, so that I shall know whether to get the carriages ready or not. In that case, why didn't you come in straight away, said Grandmother Jia, instead of lurking around outside. I could see that you were playing cards, said Jia Lian with a somewhat artificial smile. I didn't like to interrupt you. I was hoping to get my wife to come out so that I could ask her. And what is there so extraordinarily urgent about this that you needed to ask her now, said Grandmother Jia. If you'd waited until she got home, you could have asked her all you wanted to then. Why this extraordinary conscientiousness all of a sudden? Eavesdropping is what you were up to more likely, or spying for somebody else. Whatever it was, you gave me a nasty turn, creeping around in that sneaky, underhand way. Disgusting creature. Your wife will be with me a long time yet playing cards. Better get back to that Zhao Er woman while you have the chance and carry on where you left off with your plans for poisoning her. The others all laughed. It was Bao Er's wife, my old love, not Zhao Er's, said Faithful, laughing. That's what I said, didn't I? Grandmother Jia snapped. Well, Zhao or Bao or brown cow, how can I be expected to remember such things? The very mention of them makes me feel angry. There were 3 generations of the family above me when I came to this household as a young bride, and now there are 3 generations below me, and I've seen many shocking and many wicked and many peculiar things during the 54 years since first I came here, but this sort of thing is simply outside my experience. Now be off with you. Jiao Yan bolted, not daring to say a word. Patience, who had been standing meanwhile outside the window, quietly mocked him as he came out. I told you so, but you wouldn't listen. You walked straight into the net, didn't you? Just at that moment Lady Xing came out. This is all father's doing, said Jiao Yan. Now we have to face the consequences. Unfilial wretch, said Lady Xing, some people would die for their fathers, but you, a few harmless words, and you are already whining and complaining. What's the matter with you? You haven't been hurt yet, though I should look out, if I were you. Father's been pretty angry these last few days. Come on, you must hurry back, mother, said Jiao Yan. He sent me to fetch you a long time ago. He saw his mother out of the main part of the mansion, and round to Jiaxi's quarters next door. Lady Xing then gave her husband, in briefest possible outline, a report of what had happened, and since it was now evident that nothing more could be done about Faithful, Jiaxi had to put up with his mortification as best he could. He did, however, from that day onwards, discontinue all duty calls on his mother on the pretext of being ill. Lady Xing and Jiao Yan were sent to make the mandatory calls on her in his stead. Meanwhile his agents scoured the market for likely girls. A suitable one was eventually purchased for the sum of 500 taels, a 17-year-old girl called Carmine, who was duly installed in his room. But that is another part of our story. The card game continued until dinner time, and it was not until after dinner that the company finally broke up. Of the day or two which followed these events our story preserves no record. The 14th came. Before it was yet daylight, Lai Dao's wife came round once more to renew her invitation. Grandmother Jia responded enthusiastically, and, taking Lady Wang, Aunt Xue, and the young people along with her, spent a considerable part of the day in the Lai family's private garden. Lai Dao's garden was not, of course, to be compared with Prospect Garden, nevertheless it was spacious and well-made, and among its pools, rocks, trees and pavilions were to be found several features of striking interest or beauty. The menfolk who were gathered in the reception hall at the front or outer part of the establishment included Xue Pan, Cousin Jin, Jiao Yan, Jia Rong, and a number of the more closely related members of the Jia clan outside the immediate family. Jiaxi was conspicuously absent. Young Lai had also invited some of his office-holding colleagues, and a few young men of good family as congenial company for the Jias. One of these last was a young gentleman called Lu Xianglian whom Xue Pan had met on some previous occasion, and hankeringly remembered ever since. The discovery that he was a keen amateur actor, one, moreover, who specialized in romantic roles, had led Xue Pan to jump to the wrong conclusion, and assume that he must share the same wind and moonlight proclivities as himself. Eager to make his closer acquaintance, but hitherto denied any opportunity of doing so, he was overjoyed at finding him among the company on this occasion, and consequently in a state of excitement, which rendered his behavior extremely unpredictable. Cousin Jin had also heard of Lu Xianglian, and admired him. Today, under pretext of being a little drunk, he had taken the liberty of asking him to perform for them, and Lu Xianglian, supported by the hired professional players, had obliged by appearing on the stage in 2 operatic numbers. When he rejoined the company, Xue Pan took the opportunity of moving over to his table, and began plying him with all sorts of questions and insinuations. Lu Xianglian was a young man of excellent family who, having lost both his parents in early youth, had failed to complete his education. He was of a dashing, impulsive nature, impatient of niceties. His chief pleasures were exercising with spear or saber, drinking, and gambling, but he was not averse to gentler pastimes. He frequented the budding groves and could play on both the flute and the zither. Because he was so young and handsome, many who did not know him mistakenly supposed that, being an actor, he must have the usual actor's propensities. Lai Da's son Lai Shangrong had been a good friend of his for years, and it was only natural that he should invite him on this occasion to help him entertain his guests. Under these circumstances Lu Xianglian was prepared to put up with a certain amount of drunken horseplay, but Xueqin was too much for him, and soon his attentions were becoming so distasteful that Xianglian resolved to leave at the earliest opportunity in order to escape from them. Before he could break away, however, Lai Shangrong detained him. "Bao Yu gave me a message for you just now. He said that though he saw you briefly when he arrived, with so many other people around, he didn't have a chance of talking to you properly. He's most anxious that you should stay on so that he can talk to you afterwards. If you are really set on going, wait while I call him out, and you can have a word with him now. What you do after that is your own affair. I certainly shan't try to detain you." He called a waiter to him. "Look inside and get hold of one of the old women. Tell her to have a quiet word with Master Bao to say that he's wanted here outside." After about the time it would take to drink a cup of tea Bao Yu appeared. "Here you are, Uncle Bao," said Lai Shangrong when he had joined them. "I leave Xianglian in your hands. I've got to go and look after my guests now." With that he left them. Taking Xianglian by the hand, Bao Yu led him into a study at the side of the hall, where they sat down together. "Have you visited Qin Zhong's grave recently?" said Bao Yu. "Certainly I have," said Xianglian. "The other day I was out hawking with a few of the others and happened to notice that we were only half a mile or so away from it. It occurred to me that it might not have stood up to all that heavy rain we had in the summer, so I left the others and went off to have a look. As a matter of fact it had been washed away a bit, so the day after I got back I scraped a few hundred cash together, went back first thing next morning, hired a couple of laborers, and got it patched up again." "That explains it," said Bao Yu. "Last month, when the pods were beginning to form on the lotuses in Prospect Garden, I picked 10 of them, and sent Tea Leaf to offer them at his grave. When he got back, I asked him if the rains had damaged it at all, and he told me that not only had it not been damaged, but that it was in even better condition than it had been the time before. I knew from that some friend must have been there recently and restored it. I wish I weren't so cooped up all the time at home. I can never do anything I want to by myself. The slightest move I make is sure to be seen and reported, and either I'm physically prevented from going where I want to or else lectured at until I promise not to go. It's useless for me ever to say that I'm going to do anything, because I know that I shan't be allowed to. I can't even spend my own money in the way I want." "This thing at least is something you don't need to worry about," said Xianglian, "with me outside to look after it for you. Anyway, it's the thought that counts. It's enough to know that you would do it yourself if you could. I've already put aside the money for his anniversary on the 1st of next month. You know how broke I always am. I never have any savings because as soon as I've got any money I spend it all. Well, this time I thought I'd better not take any chances, so I put some by well in advance, so as not to have to stretch my hands out helplessly when the time comes." "I was going to send Tea Leaf round to see you about that," said Bao Yu, "but you never seem to be at home, and you're such a rolling stone that no one ever knows where to look for you." "Don't bother to try," said Xianglian. "This is a matter in which each of us does what he can. Anyway, I shall be going away quite soon. It will probably be 3 or 4 years before I come back again." "Why?" said Bao Yu in some agitation. "That's something you'll know soon enough when the time comes. I must be going now." "Must you?" said Bao Yu. "I so seldom get a chance of seeing you. Can't we leave together in the evening?" "I'm afraid it's that cousin of yours," said Xianglian. The usual problem. If I stay any longer, there's sure to be some kind of trouble. I'd much better go now and avoid it. Bao Yu reflected for some moments. Yes, I suppose in that case you'd better. Only, if you really and truly are going away for a long time, do please let me know before you start. Please don't just slip away without telling me. His eyes brimmed over with tears. Of course I'll come and say goodbye to you, said Xiang Lian. As long as you promise not to tell anyone. He stood up to go. You go in again now. Don't try to see me out. He left the study and made his way to the main gate, but there, unfortunately, was the very person he was trying to avoid. Who's let my little Lu get away? Xueqin bawled. Xiang Lian's eyes flashed angrily. In other circumstances he would have laid him out there, and then with a single blow of his fist, but reflecting that to do so now would be interpreted by the others as drunken brawling, and would moreover be embarrassing to his host, he restrained himself with some effort. Xueqin, in whose besotted eyes he appeared as a coveted treasure that was moving at last within his grasp, lurched towards him, smiling happily, and gripped him firmly by the arm. Where are you off to, little pal? Just going out for a stroll, said Xiang Lian. I'll be back again directly. It won't be any more fun here without you, said Xueqin. Do stay a bit longer, just to show me that you care for me, eh? If it's business that's taking you away, don't worry, leave it to me. I don't care how important it is, whether it's a career you're after or making a pile, with me for a pal you'll have no more to worry about. Angered and revolted by his odious intimacy, Xiang Lian quickly thought of a plan for disposing of him. Drawing him aside to a spot where they could not be overheard, he pretended to question his sincerity. Are you really so fond of me, or are you just pretending? Xueqin was almost beside himself. His eyes became tiny slits of pleasure. How can you ask such a question, my dear? Pretending? May I die this instant if I am? Good. This place here is not convenient. We'd better go in again now and sit with the others for a bit. Then I'll leave, and you can leave a bit after me and follow me back to my place. We'll make a night of it. I've got a couple of very nice little boys there who've never been out before, so you needn't bring anyone with you, all the service we'll need is there already. Xueqin was by now so delighted that his drunkenness had already half left him. Do you mean this? What a person, said Xiang Lian. One opens one's heart to you and you don't trust them. No, said Xueqin hurriedly. I trust you. I'm no fool. There's only one thing, though, I don't know where you live. If you leave before I do, where am I to look for you? My place is outside the north gate, said Xiang Lian. Do you think you can tear yourself from home, and spend a whole night outside the city? What do I need a home for if I've got you, said Xueqin. All right, said Xiang Lian. I'll wait for you on the bridge then, outside the north gate. We'd better get back to the party now. Don't forget, wait a bit after I've gone before going yourself, then no one should suspect anything. Yes, said Xueqin, yes. The two of them then went in again, and resumed their places. Xueqin found waiting difficult, and kept his eyes constantly on Xiang Lian, watching for him to go. At the same time he began, in joyous anticipation of the pleasures in store, to drink with greater and greater abandon, not waiting for the wine to be offered, but stretching out rudely to left and right of him and plying himself from the wine kettles of his neighbors. Soon he was very drunk indeed. Xiang Lian now rose to go and succeeded in slipping out of the main gate unobserved. First he gave an order to his page Almond, who was waiting there. You go home now. I have some business outside the city to attend to. I'll be back later. Then he vaulted into the saddle and rode off until he came to the north gate of the city. Passing through, he rode on till he came to the bridge, where he halted and took up his station to wait for Xueqin's arrival. After the time it would take to eat a meal, he caught sight of Xueqin hurrying along in the distance. His mouth was open, his eyes were staring, and his head turned from side to side as he looked anxiously about him, for all the world like one of those little clapper drums that children twirl upon a stick. So intent was he on scanning the remoter parts of the landscape that he failed to take note of what was nearer at hand and rode right past Xiang Lian without seeing him. Xiang Lian, who for all his loathing could not but laugh at this, gave his horse rein and followed after. Presently Xueqin began to notice that he was getting into the open country, and brought his horse round about. As he did so, he found himself almost face to face with Xiang Lian. "I knew you wouldn't fail me," he cried delightedly. Xiang Lian smiled back. "Let's go on a bit further, just in case anyone is tracking us." He trotted on ahead and Xueqin followed, keeping as close to him as he could. Presently, having satisfied himself that the country ahead was quite deserted, Xiang Lian dismounted near the edge of a reed-filled dike and tied his horse up to a tree. "You get down too," he called pleasantly to Xueqin. "Let's first swear an oath that if either of us is unfaithful to the other or betrays our secret to anyone, it shall happen to him as the oath shall say." "Yes," said Xueqin. "Good idea." He dismounted eagerly, tied his horse to another tree, and straightway knelt down and began his oath. "If ever, in the days to come, I prove unfaithful or betray this secret to another, may heaven and earth destroy." He got no further. At that point there was a great thump, and the sensation of being hit on the back of the neck by an object like a large iron hammer. Everything became suddenly black, except that the darkness was filled with a confusion of flying stars, and he collapsed forwards helplessly upon the ground. Xiang Lian stepped up and surveyed him from above. Someone not used to taking punishment, he concluded. It would be unwise to use too much force on him. Turning him over, he performed, with a few deft flicks over Xueqin's face, the operation, which is described in the profession as opening up the fruit shop. At first Xueqin struggled to get up, but Xiang Lian lashed out with his foot, and sent him sprawling once more upon his back. "You were willing, just as much as I was," Xueqin muttered plaintively. "You had only to say so if you weren't. Why fool me into coming out here with you and then beat me up?" He began cursing him obscenely. "You blind iniquity," said Lu Xiang Lian. "You don't know who you're dealing with. You should be begging for mercy right now, not swearing at me. You're not worth killing though. I'll just give you a little lesson." He picked up his horsewhip and turning Xueqin on his face once more, proceeded to deal him 30 or 40 cuts along the length of his body, from his shoulders down to his calves. Xueqin was by now half sober, and finding the pain unbearable, began to roar. "Look at you," said Xiang Lian contemptuously. "I should have thought you could take your medicine a bit better than that." He took him by the left leg and dragged him a few steps to where the reeds began, in the stagnant ooze of the dike, so that he was coated from head to foot with the liquid mud. "Now," he said, "do you know who I am?" As Xueqin merely lay in the mud whimpering and made no reply, he threw away his whip and gave him a few thumps with his fist. Xueqin rolled about and bellowed. "You've broken my ribs. I know you're straight. It was the others who told me you weren't. I shouldn't have listened to them." "Leave the others out of this," said Xiang Lian. "I'm talking about now." "Now," said Xueqin. "Now I know you're straight. I know I was wrong. What more can I say?" "You'll have to talk a bit prettier than that before I've finished with you," said Xiang Lian. "Old pal," Xueqin began, whimpering. Xiang Lian dealt him another thump with his fist. "Ow! Old chap." 2 thumps this time. "Ow! Ow! Sir, then. Please, sir, forgive me for being so blind. From now on I shall honor you and fear you." "Now drink some of this water," said Xiang Lian. Xueqin knitted his brows with disgust. "But this water is really filthy. I couldn't get it down." Xiang Lian raised his fist threateningly. I'll drink, said Xueqin hurriedly. I'll drink. He bent down and drank a mouthful of the water at the base of the reeds, but before he could swallow it, there was a great retching noise and he vomited up all that he had recently eaten and drunk. Filthy pig, said Xiang Lian. Now eat that up and I'll let you off. Xueqin began kowtowing to him. Please, for your soul's sake, earn a bit of merit, don't try to make me do that. I couldn't do that if you killed me. This stench is poisoning me, said Xiang Lian, and leaving Xueqin, he unfastened his horse, led it off a few paces, vaulted into the saddle, and galloped away. Observing with relief that Xiang Lian had really gone, Xueqin, cursing his folly for having been so egregiously mistaken in his man, attempted to struggle to his feet, but every part of him was hurting so much that it was impossible for him to rise. Meanwhile, back at the party, Cousin Jin and the others, suddenly noticing that the two of them were missing, sought them for a while without success. Someone did say that they thought they might have gone out of the north gate, but Xueqin had told his pages not to follow him, and they were all in such dread of their master that none of them dared go out there to look. In the end, Cousin Jin became so uneasy that he sent Jiarong with some of the boys to track them down. Their trail led them through the north gate and about 2/3 of a mile along the road, which crosses the bridge outside it. There, suddenly, they caught sight of Xueqin's horse, tied up to one of the trees at the side of a reed-filled dike. Good, they said. Where the horse is, the rider must be. And all of them went over to where the horse was standing. As they did so, they heard someone groaning among the rushes, and there, when they went to look, was Xueqin, his clothes torn, his face cut and swollen almost beyond recognition, and so besmirched with mud from head to foot that he had more the appearance of an old wallowing sow than of a human being. Jiarong had little difficulty in guessing what had happened. Slipping from his horse, he ordered the servants to help Xueqin to his feet. Tireless in the pursuit of love, uncle, he said cheerfully, while they struggled to do his bidding. This time it's led you into the reeds of the marshes. I suppose the Dragon King must have taken a fancy to you and carried you off to be his son-in-law. To judge from appearances, I should say that you must have got caught up on his horn. Xueqin wished that the earth would open and swallow up his shame. As there was clearly no question of getting him onto his horse, Jiarong told one of the boys to hurry back to the street outside the north gate and hire a carrying chair. When Xueqin had been helped into this, they had him carried into the city, themselves accompanying him on horseback. Jiarong mischievously proposed that they should take him back to the Lei's house to rejoin the party, but Xueqin entreated so piteously and begged him so earnestly not to tell anyone of his plight, that Jiarong relented and allowed him to go back home alone. Jiarong himself returned to the party to report back to his father. From his account of the state Xueqin had been in when they found him, Cousin Jin deduced that he must have been beaten up by Lu Xianglian, but appeared remarkably unconcerned, for he merely laughed and observed that he could do with the lesson. It is true that he went to inquire after him in the evening, when he got back home from the party, but Xueqin was by that time nursing his injuries in bed and declined to see him on the grounds that he was feeling too ill. When Grandmother Jia and her party had got back to their several apartments, Aunt Xue and Bao Chai found Caltrip with her eyes all swollen from weeping. On discovering the cause, they rushed in to look at Xueqin. Fortunately, he appeared to have no bones broken, but his face and body had taken a terrible battering. Torn between maternal anguish at his plight and anger at the folly which had occasioned it, Aunt Xue inveighed against Xueqin and Xianglian by turns. She wanted to tell Lady Wang and get her to have Xianglian arrested, but was dissuaded from doing so by Bao Chai. It's not important enough for that, Mama. The two of them had been drinking and fell out over their cups, that's all there was to it. Whenever that happens, it's always the drunker of the two who gets the worst of it. Besides, everyone knows what a lawless, ungovernable creature Pan is. It's only because you're his mother that you feel differently. If it's satisfaction you want, that can easily be arranged. Just wait a few days until Pan is better and can get about again. I'm sure Mr. Zhen and Mr. Lian and the other menfolk will be unwilling to pass over this in silence. Probably they will get up a little party and ask this person to it, and make him apologize to Pan in front of everyone and admit that he was to blame. But if you insist on making an issue of it now and telling Aunt about it, you will make it appear that you are so blind to Pan's faults that you allow him to go around provoking other people, but that as soon as someone stands up to him, you fly up in arms and use our relations' influence to oppress them. Aunt Xueqin once saw the force of this. You are quite right, my child. I was being silly. Dear Mama. But now you are being sensible. He doesn't fear you, and he won't listen to anyone else. He just goes on getting worse and worse. One or two good, sharp shocks like this might bring him to his senses. Meanwhile Xueqin lay on the Kong in his bedroom, cursing Xiang Lian by every name he could think of and calling on his boys to smash up his house, to beat him to death, to have the law on him. Aunt Xueqin shouted to them that they were to do no such thing. To Xueqin she explained that Xiang Lian was in any case beyond the reach of his vengeance. Xiang Lian behaved very badly because he was drunk. When he came to himself afterwards he was very sorry, and now, because he is afraid of the consequences, he has fled the country. When Xueqin heard that But you shall learn that, if you wish, in the following chapter.